morning. I'm excited you're here. If you're a guest, or if this is kind of, you're still new or newer to Journey, we're in a series called Next. And this is a series where we've been asking the question, what does God have next for us as a congregation, as a body, going forward in our community? We're coming up on, in fact, next week, we'll celebrate a one-year anniversary for us and our grand opening in this space. And that was a long time coming. Yeah, you can clap for that. Go ahead, because you know who's clapping. The people who are clapping are the people that used to set up every Sunday morning with us, and they're like, yeah, hallelujah. And it's been a lot of fun to go from that portable, right, space where we've been to a permanent space. But if you're a guest, let me just say something, because this series is asking a question, but it's wrapped around an initiative where on April 14th, we're going to make a commitment, a sacrificial, above and beyond financial commitment for Journey going into the future. Now, if you're a guest, we're letting you off the hook, all right? So relax, put your pocketbook. Nobody carries a checkbook anyway these days, right? Nobody carries a checkbook. Nobody carries cash. Put your credit cards away. Put your, what's the Venmo account away. Put your phone away unless you're looking at the Bible. No, seriously, I want you to relax. If you're a regular with us, I keep saying this to you so you can relax too. This is a completely voluntary initiative. We never force anybody to give anything around here, right? That's part of the gospel. We believe there's freedom there. So all I'm asking is for you to do what I ask you to do every week, right? Which is kind of show up, right? That's always nice. You show up. I don't like to be up here and nobody's there. That makes my job weird. But show up and listen, engage me in the conversation, and then pray about it, and then seek what God has for you to do. Just be obedient to that, right? So that's all we're asking in this whole process. I say to you over and over and over again, God's people have God's money to do God's work. So all we have to do is be obedient and let God do the rest of that, right? As we move into this initiative, though, we started last week, we're not necessarily talking about the specifics of the initiative. If you miss the vision briefings, when you go out in just a little bit, there's a vision briefing flyer just outside those doors. You can pick that up and you can see some of the details of what we're talking about with this initiative going forward. But what we want to talk about here, what I want to talk about as a group when we're together on Sunday mornings, is the principles that Christ puts in his teachings for us that deal with our money and our possessions. This is one of the biggest things we deal with in this world, right? In fact, I said to you last week, I made this statement. I said, money is a primary competitor for your heart in this world. Money is a primary competitor. It's going to be the thing that jumps out and tries to take you away, steal you away from other good things. And there is really, I believe, okay, you may not agree with me, but let me propose this to you. I believe that's because there is one major reality in the scriptures, in the Bible, that all the authors, all the writers talk about, and it's this, that everything belongs to God. If everything belongs to God, then money becomes this distraction in a way, because it competes for the emotions and the desires of our heart. It competes for the place in our world that where we get to own, it feels like, everything around us. Well, we don't need to own everything around us because God already owns everything. Everything belongs to God. Sue and I see this all the time. You probably know this is true. We've had more than one marriage meltdown over money, but when you talk to couples who are divorced or who are going through hard times, money can be one of the leading indicators. It's always one of those high, stressful topics that come up in a marriage. Money is a hard thing. And there's enough in the scriptures, there's enough about the teaching of Jesus that we discover he says so much about money and possessions, and for some reason we never talk about it. So those are the things I want to dig into. So last week, as we begin to talk about how God owns everything belongs to God, I came up with this statement for you. I said that really frees us up to what? Surrender. That we can surrender to the fact that God owns everything, and then we don't have to struggle to possess anything. We don't have to have that struggle in our lives about possessing things, feeling like we've got to have all this stuff and we got to keep it, right? This is one of the reasons that my family doesn't play board games with me sometimes, because I just get upset because if I can't win, I don't want to play. Like, I want to own everything on the board, whatever's on the board. That's fake money to you. That's real money to me, a Monopoly, okay? That's why we don't play that game at my house. So last week, at the end of the morning, here's what I did. I gave you an envelope, right? I did. I checked with the elders first. We gave out money last Sunday. If you weren't here, you missed it. We gave out money. And I issued this kind of generosity challenge. I said, look, if everything belongs to God, and we don't have to now struggle about the things that we have to possess. We can actually learn how to work with the stuff He's entrusted to us. That if it all belongs to Him anyway, then we just need to start asking the question, what do I do with it? What do I do with it? And He's going to direct us in those steps. So last week we handed out you an envelope and it had $5 in it. The challenge was this: simply ask God, what do you want me to do with that $5 this week? Ask. And about midweek, I love it, the stories started pouring in. I want to tell you a couple of them real quick, but I know you have stories. And if you haven't turned in your story, email it to me, write it in the note card we put in the envelope, drop it in the box. We want to keep telling these stories. But I love some of the things I'm already hearing. Mark and Whitney emailed me about middle of the week. Mark said this, he led with this in his email. He goes, ironically, you like how to do air quotes still? Right, it was my generation. We developed those. Ironically, right, he says, ironically, Whitney had already started buying some things that she wanted to carry to give away to people who were in need when she runs into them. Ironically. He goes, so we took the money we got from Journey and we bought more stuff. We put it all together. And then I love it. He says, then we went out looking. Like they just intentionally went to the streets. Anybody go to the streets this week? Don't raise your hands. And they went to the streets. They went with these backpacks full of stuff. And he said, the first person we ran into was Christopher. He said, Christopher's been out of work for 8 or 9 months. Believe it or not, Christopher actually is a degree. Nobody wants to hear this if you're in college. Sorry, plug your ears for a second. He has a degree and he's out of work. And he suffered a motorcycle accident. And so he has struggled. And Christopher is hurting and needed some help. And I love it because Mark gave him, there's Christopher walking away. Mark gave him some stuff. They gave him some supplies. But Mark didn't just stop there. He said, hey, here's my business card with my phone number. If you need anything, call me. $5. $5 went from an envelope to supplies to meet with Christopher on the street to a contact. I love that story. They ran into the next lady they ran into was Mary. Mary had been in retail for 23 years and lost her job, right? You ever heard that story? Lost her job. Now she's about 3 months behind on her rent. She said, as a last-ditch effort, I wanted to go out and try to see if I could maybe get some money. She goes, I just am at the end of my rope. So she goes out and she runs into Mark and Whitney. They gave her some supplies, but they also did that one thing I love. Mark said, here, take my business card. If you need anything, call me. And Mark tells me that she's supposed to call him. We haven't heard the result of that yet. But that story's ongoing, right? $5 made it that far. I love one of our little ones because we brought everybody up last week. We brought those kids up. If you weren't here, it was a lot of fun. As you said, I'm going to give you $5, and their eyes got real big. And then you said, but it's not yours. You got to spend it on somebody else. And their faces kind of went, huh? And they were all perplexed for a little bit. But one of our young gals, Sierra, just did an amazing thing. And I said last week, $5. It's not about the amount, right? But I want you to hear what a child can do even when they start thinking about it. She started thinking about it. She told her mom, she said, I want to help human traffic victims. Okay, so $5 for human trafficking. I think we've got that solved, right? $5. She says, I want to give my money to this Traffic 911. I want to be able to help those people. And so she and her mom talked about it, and she ended up throwing up on Facebook a challenge to her mom's friends and all. And she said, hey, I'm going to give $5 to this human trafficking organization. And they put a little link and said, I would invite you to do the same. Well, this morning, her link said she's up to over $326. People have donated $5. $5 is all it took. A little ingenuity. Yeah, you can clap for that too. Isn't that cool? I love that kind of story. I love that kind of story. One more, and I'm probably going to run late now because I'm telling all these stories. One more. So last Monday night, a group of ladies are meeting for a Bible study in our home, and my wife is telling the story of the Generosity Challenge because some of the ladies couldn't be there last Sunday, be here with us. So she's telling everybody about it. And Lana, if you don't know Lana, you can all thank Lana because she's the reason you have coffee on Sunday mornings, right? Lana starts, yeah, you clap for that too. I love it. This place is clap happy today. This is the best thing ever. So Lana stops and says, wait a minute, when did this happen? What did you do? And so she starts telling the story that last Sunday morning she had to go to work. She got called into work. And she said that up in North McKinney at an intersection, there's a homeless guy that will often be at the intersection. She said he's normally on the opposite side, but because of my schedule that morning and when I was going and he was out, he was on my side of the highway. And she goes, as I'm driving, she goes, it never happened, but I'm driving and just something in me says, give him something now. She said, that's what, she goes, I just felt it in me. She goes, it was just real. It's just sitting at the intersection. She reaches in her purse. You know what she pulls out? $5 bill. A $5 bill and hands it to him and says, God bless you. That's what happens when listen, that money's it's been there, right? We could have just kept that money. We could have paid a bill with it this week or something. But $5, and what do? We start asking God, what do we do with the things you trusted me with? That's what this is about. That's what this is about. So it's about surrender. Now, moving from surrender last week, I want to talk about what's next this morning. I want to talk about stewardship. Because when you surrender to something or someone for a reason. If you surrender to God, it's because you've come to a point in your life where you understand that you can't do anything but surrender to Him, that He is exactly who He says He is, that Jesus is the Son of God. He declared that He would die, be crucified, 3 days later get up and walk out of the grave, and He did it. And if you've come to that awareness, if you've accepted that truth, then you're at that place of surrender. But now the question is, if God owns everything, then how do I steward it? If He's entrusted it to me, then what do I do with it? Not just money, but my life. But we're going to focus on money, but it's both things, right? Because the money is in your life. So why should we steward our money and lives in ways that reflect this generosity that's often unseen in this world? That's what I want to talk about this morning, stewardship. I want to start by having you look at the logo behind me, or you can look at it on your brochure if you like. My very talented daughter designed this logo for us, and she designed this a few months back as I was talking with her and kind of rehearsing some things about this initiative. And it's real simple. In fact, you don't have to be a graphic designer. You don't have to be very creative. You can figure this thing out if you want. The arrow circling the word next, we're just simply asking the question, what is next? That's all the logo was meant to do. It's very simple. I love it. What is next? And when you ask that question, it's kind of a philosophical question. In fact, what I'm really asking you to ask and answer is, what are your means to the end? What are your means to your end? That's a philosophical statement, but essentially it's asking the same thing. What's next? It's asking, what are my means? What actions do I want to take to achieve the desired results, the end? What actions do I want to take, right, to achieve something? Because our actions result in achievements. When you act, there will be some kind of achievement accomplished. And that is the question it's a simple question. And some of you are probably going, well, wait a minute, Cecil, if you're asking and answering this question, what do I want to do? What are my actions to get me to a certain end, to my achievements? Then it seems kind of like you're saying, I can just do this without God. See, I hope I'm anticipating the question in your head. I really want you to ask that question because I think it's legit. I think it's a great, simple question. Can I do this without God? I think there's an easy answer. All right, to do this, I want you to participate with me again. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, but not just yet. Raise your hand and answer this question. Raise your hand if you yourself, or if you don't want to answer for yourself, if you know somebody. It's always easier to raise your hand when you're answering for somebody else. Raise your hand if you or yourself, somebody you know, somebody you love, has ever made some kind of action, right? They've done something, they've acted in a way that results in a really negative experience at the end. Raise your hand if you've ever gotten caught up in some bad circumstances because of your own actions or the actions of somebody else. If you don't want to answer for yourself, because I understand, there you go. I think that's the easiest way to ask this question. That if you stop and think about it, we all know what good ends look like, right? We know what the end of a good life could look like. We know what's desirable. We know what things are good. Right? We know that to have a healthy, long marriage, if that's the end game, if that's what we want to have, then there are some actions we ought to focus on to make the marriage healthy and last and work out in the end. Everybody oohs and ahs over the couple that's in their 90s, right? And they've been married for 50-something years. Everybody oohs and ahs over that. But how hard is it to get there, right? Because the actions aren't as easy as we think. So when you say, what kind of actions am I going to take to achieve something? It's not just that easy. If it was, everybody would have a great end to this game, right? There's a song that came to mind. Part of it's because of my age. Part of it's because it's one of those songs that's been played. You're going to know it even if you're young. It's a one-hit wonder from the 70s. I'm going to read you a verse from it, and I'm only going to read you a verse because I don't want everybody crying, okay? So here's this, to me, proves what I'm talking about, that these actions sometimes get in the way of our end game. My child arrived just the other day. He came into the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay, so basically it's the 70s, sounds like the 2019. He learned to walk while I was away. And he was talking before I knew it. And as he grew, he'd say, I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be like you. Now, that's as far as I'm going to go because I can sense. I mean, that's a heavy song, right? Those are heavy lyrics. You tend to want to know, I wish I knew more about the author of this song, the composer. I wish I knew what he was really talking about. Like, was it his own life or was he observing this from somebody else? But the reality is, our actions will cost us a lot of times. We know what looks like the good end of a life. We know some desired ends that are good for us. We know what that can look like, but our actions can trip us up, right? We chase things that we shouldn't chase. I want to take you to Luke 16 this morning. There's a parable that Jesus tells. And I want to remind you, a parable is a made-up story, right? That Jesus he's making this story up to make a point. He's not trying to lie to anybody. It's a parable. It was very acceptable. We do it in our culture. We illustrate things. You do it. Right? When you ask your child, would you jump off a cliff if all your friends jumped in? Their friends didn't jump off the same cliff, right? You know that. You're making up a story to make a point. This is what Jesus is doing. He's making up a story to make a point. And remember last week, I said when he tells these parables, right, there's two things that every audience around him was going to ask. Where is God in the story? And then where am I in the story, right? Luke is very intentional. He was a doctor, and then he became a follower of Jesus, and he's very intentionally telling stories because he wants you to understand the teachings of Jesus. And when Jesus tells this parable, there's two crowds around him. One, there's these disciples. The disciples don't think just the apostles, don't think just the 12. This word is more encompassing. It's all these people that were following him. The second group, just out of their hearing, were the Pharisees, these religious leaders, okay? So these two groups are around him, and Jesus starts to tell this parable. Here he goes, Luke 16, verse 1. He also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called to him, and he said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. Now, I read to you every week, and I need to say this probably more often. This is from the ESV version. I like it. It's a great, very literal translation. Okay? In other words, the words correspond to the Greek and the Hebrew in such a way that it's very, very literal. This is the kind of the translation that I would say study from this kind of translation. If you want a little more emotion or passion sometimes, and you want to check things out, I love what the NLT, the New Living Translation, says in verse 2. Here you catch a little more of the flair of what's going on. It says, so the employer called him and said, what's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you're going to be fired. He's like, just bottom line. And you know, the funny thing is does anybody disagree with that? Like, if you found out you had a company, you owned your own business, and you found out somebody was stealing from you, right? This guy's walking out. Listen, he's not walking out with whiteout. Does anybody use whiteout anymore? He's not walking out with company pens and yellow pads or memo pads. He's walking out with computers or something. This guy is stealing from his master. And the thing is in this day, this is very common. A master would have owned property maybe several towns away. And so he would have hired somebody like this, a manager. A better word is steward. He would have hired a steward to oversee all of his accounts, all of his affairs. And that guy would have all the authority of the master. All right, so remember, Jesus is telling a parable. Where am I at in the story? Where's God at? Well, it becomes very obvious that God is the master in this story, but we still don't know where I am in the story. But we do recognize that the master, he needs to fire the manager, the steward. It's bad news. He's stealing from him. Verse 3. And so the manager says to himself, what shall I do? Since my master is taking the management away from me, which shouldn't have shocked him, I'm not going to, I love this, I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. Okay, what do we call this? Is this a desk jockey? What is this? This guy has been sitting for way too long. Like, he has started skipping. He's not going into work early anymore so he can go to the gym before he gets there. He's not skipping lunch so he can go to the gym. This guy's been sitting at his desk too long. This guy's large and in charge. He's got all the power. And he knows it. He knows that people recognize him. Like, I'm the guy that's in charge. I manage all this property. This is how people know me. I'm a big deal around here. And by the way, I no longer have enough muscles. I'm not going to go dig a ditch. It's way too much sweating for me. Or I don't, right? I can't stand at the corner and beg. I can't do that. These people know who I am. These people realize that I'm a big deal, right? I'm too proud to stand and beg. Keep going, verse 4. He says, I've decided what to do. So that when I'm removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. Now, the structure of this sentence, right, verse 4, the structure of that verse tells us a couple things. One, he is as corrupt as we think he is, and that he already knows, he already has this kind of corrupt plan, this plan that can save his hide. He already knows what he's going to do, so that, because he's going to lose this job, and he's going to lose all the cush benefits, and he's going to lose all of his, probably the excess funds that he was playing with, and spreading around and stealing, and he's going to lose all of that, and he's going to lose his house, and he's going to lose probably the people around him. He says, I got a plan. I got a plan so that when that happens, I actually will have a place to live. Okay, we know God's the master, right? But who am I in the story? Keep going, verse 5. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he says to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he says, 100 measures of oil. And he, the manager, said, take your bill, sit down quickly and write it for 50. Well, sit down quickly. Like, he knows I'm about to be fired. I'm about to be out of here. How much do you owe? I owe 100 measures of oil. I tell you what, can you pay 50 right now? Like, I'll erase your bill. Now, listen to me. He's not doing anything wrong. He has still the full authority. He has not been fired yet. He has full authority by the owner, right, the master, to manage his affairs. He has full authority to give anybody a discount. He wants to give a discount. Realize that in the past he made money because it made money for him, made money for his master, and made him reliable to his master. But now he's going to start being shrewd. Write it for 50. All right, I'll do that. Verse 7. Then he said it to another, how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write it for 80. We're going to cut 20% off the top. Now, if you're the business owner, if you're the master, you're ready to fire the guy, right? He's stealing from you. He's taking your profits. He's letting people off the hook. But these people know a good deal, and he's not doing anything wrong. Before we moved into the house that we're in fact, this summer will be, I think, 16 years that we've lived in this house we're in. Before we moved into this house, we were looking around, and we had found a couple of places, but the salesperson in the neighborhood that we were looking at, that we now live in, knew the house we were looking at, the house we really favored and liked, but it was at the top end, right, of our budget. It was very top end of our budget at the time. And so she very wisely pulled my wife aside one day, and of course, word spread to me very quickly. And here's the proposition, right? If you're in sales, this is probably a good thing, but this actually proved to be true. So we weren't being swindled at the time. But she said, hey, just so you know, that house goes up $20,000 in a week. Like, if you sign before this week is up, you get it for this price. But if you sign next week, it's for X plus another $20,000. Well, it was already at the top of our budget. And she very wisely knew that the next week we were not going to sign on that house if it went up. So she let us know. Did she do anything wrong? No. She probably lost a little bit of money for her builders, right? But she knew she was going to lose the sale altogether. She was very shrewd about it. And we liked the price, so we went ahead and closed on the house. So that solves that story. But you see, she didn't do anything wrong. This guy's not doing anything wrong. He's being very, very shrewd. If you were his boss, you might fire him. But he hasn't necessarily done anything wrong. He's having people remember him, right? We still tell that story about that lady that sold us that house, right? That's what he's going for. The people are going to say, oh my gosh, I remember you. You cut me a great deal. Yeah, what can we do for you now? And that's what he wants to have happen. Nothing, everything in this story is going as we think right now. You can expect the master to fire this guy, right? You're going to expect that the servant, the steward, is going to get, the manager is going to get fired. Neither of these actions are terribly shocking. But look now, we still don't know who we are in the story. I want you to see something. Look at verse 8 now. As we get into this, and this is the more shocking part of the story. It says, the master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. When the manager heard about all this stuff, the master heard about all this stuff, he commended the guy. He called him out. He said, man, that was really a good move. Like, you covered your back end. Good for you. And watch what he says. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation. The sons of this world, people who live according to this world's system, people who live according to this world's standard, people who don't follow God, people who believe that the end of this whole thing is just to get out of it whatever you can get out of it. People who follow the system of the world, not God's way of living and thinking. He says, they are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. The sons of light is a phrase that those Pharisees standing in the corners would have realized. That was a phrase that would have been applied to the nation of Israel. That was the people who followed God. And all of a sudden, it hit them like a ton of bricks. It hit them. That steward is a worldly person. He's just simply trying to survive this life and get the best out of it that he can get. And so he's going to do whatever he can do to get the best out of his life. He's thinking about it all the time. He's thinking about how to be shrewd, how to be cunning, how to get the most out of this life, even if he feels like it's a little underhanded. Even if he feels like, as a manager or as a master, as an owner, you're going to fire the guy, he's constantly thinking about how to better his situation. The sons of light aren't thinking with that kind of urgency. They're standing in the background right here. In fact, there's no urgency to their situation. The master commends this guy for thinking with this urgency, for thinking about how to use the bills and his job to pave a way for himself to get a desired end to this life, right? Now listen to me. The implication is not that you and I should go out and cheat people, right? That's not the implication. The implication is not that we should go out and cheat our bosses or cheat at work or steal things. That's not the implication. The implication is we should be shrewd in how we think about the things of this life that we use and where it gets us, right? That we should be thinking about how we use our money, how we use our resources, how we use the things God has entrusted to us, and what the ends of that can look like. Jesus scolds these guys. He says, you're not alert. You're not aware. You're not paying attention. You're not motivated by the truth of the gospel. Everything belongs to God, and you're not being creative about how to use the things I've entrusted to you to get to the end of this life in the way that I've promised you it can get to. Look at his exhortation in verse 9. He says, I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth. Okay, this is not like blood money, okay? He's not saying, go out and get you some dirty money. He's just saying, look, the world system is not righteous. The world system, the whole money belongs to the world system. It's going to go away one day. Money is not a great end to this whole thing, right? You ever seen a hearse going down the street with a giant U-Haul behind it and all the guy's stuff is inside of it? You don't see that. Why? Because money's not a great end to this life. Money is a great means to some things in life. He's telling his disciples, hey, pay attention, right? Make friends for yourselves by that unrighteous wealth. Use your money so that, watch this, when it fails, when the money fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. Look, you can take friends with you into eternity. You cannot take your money with you into eternity. You can take family members with you into eternity. You cannot take your money. You can take relationships into eternity. You cannot take any of your belongings. They're not going. The end's going to come, right? And money's not going to be there. money will end as well. Money, write this down. Money makes for a great means. Money does not make for a great end. Money makes for a great means. It does not make for a great end. And so many of us, listen, we get so uptight, and I'm right there with you because I live there, right? I got the same bills. We got all the same situations, the same medical things, cars break down. Money keeps us so uptight. Why? Because we think that we need to have enough to make life end well. The reality is, it doesn't get us there. It's a means. And we can use it, we can steward it in such a way that that life at the end is what God wants it to be, and we'll walk into eternity with the people and the relationships around us, but not our stuff, right? So we've moved from portable to permanent in this culture. We did it because we understand that to really have a stay in this community, right? To be able to bless this community, we need to belong first. So now that we belong, we need to bless. And we did all of this knowing that the money piece is going to be a problem, that it's going to cost us something. Now, I'm talking to you as your pastor now, and understand that all of this applies to your personal life, and that personal life is what fits into this bigger life together. Belonging in this community costs us something, and we want to use our money to make friends as much as we can. This is why, write this down, we steward our actions with our desired achievements in mind. This is why we're asking you to pray about stewarding your actions, stewarding the things God's entrusted to you. As we think about the end, the achievements we want to have in this community. So now let me back it up for just a second. How are you doing? Right? If you think about your life, how are you doing stewarding your life? How are you doing stewarding the things God's entrusted to you? Right? We need to realize that money adds value to life, but money is not life. How are we doing stewarding that stuff? When you came in, I want to walk you through an illustration real quick. When you came in, you were handed a paper tape measure. The nurses in the room will recognize this. This is what they actually use to some of you already know that. It's what you use to measure babies when they're born. They hand out these little paper tape measures, and you can record all the stats on there. And I'm going to ask you to look at the centimeters, not the inches, because I know it's 2019 and inches are going away, but also because I needed more lines on my ruler than just 40. So forget the 40 inches for a second, and I want you to look at the centimeters. And here's what I want you to do. With your right thumb, I want you to find 79. And when you get to 79 centimeters, not inches, 79, I want you to put your thumb right there on 79 and hold it right there. I could barely see it myself. Got 79, put your right thumb on it. See, here's one thing we know in this country right now, in this world we live in, is most of us, the average age is 79. That 79 is about when we will live to. Now, for those of you who are close to that or beyond it even, can I say something to you? You can put your right thumb wherever you want to put it, because I don't care, right? I figure if you're close to 79, you get your own choice in this thing, right? 79 is what we know is the average age in this country. Now, if that causes you to despair just a little bit, let me say something to you. In 1900, you know what the average age was? 48. 48. So I want you to think about that for a second, because that means in 100 years, we've added another 2 life cycles or another 2 stages of life to life, and who knows what we're going to add in the next 50 years, right? 79. So you got 79. Now you're going to take your left thumb, and you're going to slide it down to whatever your age is currently. Or that was cute. She said she had to slide the other way. If you didn't hear that, that was great. So for those of us that are still to the left of our right thumb, here's what I want you to notice. This is not to be depressing. This is not to make you upset or anxious. Listen, it's our ability to look at our lives and say, what have you entrusted me with so far, God? And we know within reason, we don't know what will happen tomorrow. Some of us will never make 79. Some of us will go way beyond 79. And the question is, are you thinking about what God has entrusted to you and how you're going to steward that, right? How will I steward my resources to get to the end of this life in the way that I want to get there, in a way that honors God? The problem is we don't like to think about this, right? We say all the time, the church is not a building. You know that. We drive that home all the time around here. The church is not a building. However, in our culture, a building is necessary to do ministry, right? It's just something that fits into our culture. So if the church is not a building, the church is the people. The people of this building should be the hope and the light of the world. To do that, we have to steward everything about us. There's an urgency that we need to pay attention to, right? There's an urgency because there's basically two ways you can look at your end of this thing. When we talk about the means to the end, there's two ways you can play this out. One is that everything that you ever wanted is in this life right now. Everything you've ever wanted, everything you've ever desired, everything you want in all of eternity exists only in this life, and you can spend your whole life focusing on it. That includes your persona, how people look at you, the respect you have, the amount of money you make, the home you buy, the car you drive. That's one way to look at the end of this thing. Or there's a second way. And it's to accept that everything belongs to God and understand that God is in charge of everything, and He's entrusted us with some things for a very short time. But beyond that, what He's entrusting to us as well is eternal life, and that eternal life is the place we will spend all eternity. So that 79 years gets really, really small in the scope of eternity. And now we ask ourselves, so what actions will we take to achieve what God desires of us? Now that you've got a measurement, now that you're thinking about it, let me ask you this: how are you going to steward your life? What actions will you take this week? Will you use your resources to expose your friends to the gospel for the first time? Let me tell you how there's some ways that we can do this too. When you leave today, on the back table, there's our newly printed Easter invites. Actually, they're our Easter flyers. These go out a week from tomorrow to 5,000 homes. We've got extras back there. You could take this invite this week. You could start taking this to work. You could start handing these out to your friends, your neighbors. Why? We have paid for these. This is an investment. But if we just think we're going to pay for them and mail them away, see, that doesn't fit us anyway, right? We're about relationships here, right? We want to walk with people. So we paid for this. Now let's steward it well. Let's take it and put it in the hands of our friends and get them here on Easter Sunday. Easter's 3 weeks from today, folks. Will you steward your life well? There's some easy things to do. And we can celebrate, just like we were talking about the $5 from last Sunday. In the future weeks, we can talk about this card. We're going to pray that there are great stories that will come out of this simple little card. Look, I know every church in the area is mailing out cards right now. I get it. If all we do is mail them out, then we've not stewarded well. We want to have relationship with people. So take these cards when you leave today, pick them up in the back, and ask God, how can I steward my life this week? And maybe it's just keeping it in a book as you walk around through your week, and God sparks a memory or stirs in you, and you just take it and hand it to somebody you're with. How are you going to steward your life this week? Let me pray for us.